move things. So I'm just going to acknowledge, I don't know if Mayor Alder is the chair of the CMPO, Mayor Providence. Todd Butler is our vice chair. We have a few board members I just want to acknowledge and appreciate. They will eventually be considering this plan for adoption in the next month or so. And we have our federal highway partners. I don't know if Tricia Sharma's on. And also Robert Miles and our Department of Public Safety. So we're grateful for all the partnerships that made this happen. And we also want to recognize Rhonda Menlove. She's a transportation commissioner representing our area and does a great job helping to convey our needs through the UDOT processes. So our consultant team on this was AECOM, Baron Piers and David Evans and Associates, and they've done a great job. Why don't you go to the next slide? So just by way of agenda, and we're going to try to move through this fairly quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about this commitment to Vision Zero, some of the data that are specific to Cache Valley, kind of revisiting some of those that were brought up in the Safety Summit, talk about ways to address safety concerns, and it really is a broad range of focus that's needed for it. Talk about grant opportunities, and then delve a little, give you a flavor of the type of projects that were identified in each city in the MPO area to try to move forward after working with the cities to identify possible safety projects and also garnering input from the general public. And then we'll have a Q&A. So we'll ask you to sort of hold your questions to the end. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. So we're going to sort of monitor that at the end, and those chat questions will try to be addressed at first. We've set this up such that you can speak. It's so we can unmute you. And if you have questions that you want to ask with your own voice, there'll be opportunity after we get to through the chat questions. So with that, we'll move forward. Next slide. So the Regional Safety Action Plan, we now have a really solid draft. It was in the invite link that was sent to you, a link to this. This is a story map. And if you scan that QR code, it will direct you to there. And as we talk through this presentation is kind of walking through that safety action plan story map and a lot of the content. There'll be more detail that you can get to, but if you want to open that up as we work through this, that would be probably helpful. Next slide. So we have committed to a vision of zero. And what that means is we are not ready to acquiesce that accidents happen and there's not a lot we can do about it and we just have to accept it. That's not a philosophy we're willing to carry forward. So the board, the executive council, supported a goal of achieving 0 fatalities in Cache County through a 2.5% reduction, yearly reduction, based on sort of a rolling average. And that may seem hard, and it is, but the motive for that is there's always something we can do. In fact, we should change our mindset that there really no such thing as accidents, there are crashes, and there's always contributing factors or reasons, and that we need to try, as leaders and agencies, need to try to figure out what those are and what we can do to change it. And the reason we need to do that is because the stakes are so high. You know, these are our fatalities. You know, I think last year, 2024, we had 12 people die in Cache County on related to transportation. And so with the stakes so high, we really have no other option but to try to move things forward and get to zero. And so that's the underpinnings of our philosophy here, is to let that guide our processes as we try to figure out ways to make things better. The good news is, and Robert Miles from UDOT, when he presented the safety summit, talked about the scope of history, where we have made significant progress over the years and decades of reducing transportation related fatalities. So we've had a lot of success. There's a lot more work to do. We're doing much better at it, but there's still a lot of work to do. And the alternative is not acceptable, but to try to get to zero. Next slide. So this just talks about, and when we say KSI, we're really focused on fatalities and serious injury crashes, because that's where we kind of need to go, so we can really try to save lives and help not impact the lives of families that would otherwise be impacted by these. So you can see kind of the trend. In 2020, we took a little bit of a reduction in total fatalities and serious injury crashes. Serious injuries, by the way, are just, it means the officer in the field or that's doing the report makes a determination of that severity, usually something that would require going to the hospital, a fairly serious life-threatening type injury. So our trend is not looking good. We're kind of, in the last, at least since the pandemic, have been creeping back up, and that's one of the reasons why we need to change this. I think it's finalized data, but our 2024 wasn't great either. And so we do have a lot of work to do on trying to change this trend and figure out, using data and local experience, how we can try to move this trajectory in a different direction. I'll turn the time over to Tim at this point. He's going to dig a little more into the data, crash data.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Tim Baird with Fair and Peers. We led up the crash data analysis. I think Jeff covered this material well. The one piece that I would point to is that as we've seen those absolute numbers of crashes going up over the past several years, especially since 2020, one piece that often is asked is, well, is that just because we're growing as a state, we're growing as a county? And the answer to that is no, it's not. It's not just about the growth that's happening across the state. We see in CMPO that crash has been increasing faster than population growth. And so we're trending up, not just overall, but also on a per capita basis. Next slide, please. Some of the risk factors that we identified here, and as Jeff alluded to, there's always a variety of factors. It's never enough to just say, well, there was human error involved in a given crash. There's always a variety of both, choices that people made, behavioral choices, as well as design considerations of the context somebody was driving or traveling in. So some of the characteristics that we saw in CMPO that were associated with higher rates of fatal and severe injury crashes included left turn and U-turn crashes, nighttime crashes in locations that didn't have street lighting or inadequate lighting, people disregarding traffic controls, so doing things like running stops and red lights, turning against a red arrow, things of that nature. DUIs, which include both alcohol and other drugs, and fixed object collisions. So somebody colliding with a structure, a guardrail, a traffic control, things like that. Next slide. A couple pieces that we drilled down on, and there's quite a bit more data analysis behind all of this that you can see in the full plan and documents available on the CMPO website. Looking at seatbelts, we saw that over half of crashes across the MPO had some level of improper restraint, somebody not using a seatbelt correctly, a child not being restrained correctly. And we see that the percent of KSIs is higher in those cases, and especially in completely unrestrained drivers, where we saw that that was about 6% of overall crashes, but 24% of fatal and serious injuries. Next slide. Teen-involved crashes were something that we heard a lot about in our outreach, in conversations that we've had locally. And the data bears out that this is a significant issue for Cache County. Teen drivers were involved in almost 30% of all crashes. Thankfully, the share of KSIs is lower there. It's about 20%, which is still, of course, too much. But thankfully, those teen driver involved incidents do tend to lean towards the more fender bender or lower consequence kind of collisions. And we saw those especially prevalent in North Logan and Smithfield, and less so in Providence, Millville, Nibley, and Hiram. Next slide. When we're thinking about non-automotive users, the big issue here is vulnerability. Somebody on a bicycle, somebody on foot, or another mobility device is more likely to be injured in any collision. And the data really bears this out in a stark way. We see that with pedestrian and bicycle crashes, over 90% of those reported crashes involve at least some injury, and 10 to 14% of those are fatal or serious injuries. By comparison, crashes that are vehicle only, about 80% of them have no injury or are property damage only, and only 1% of them are fatal or severe injury. So this really points us towards safety for those vulnerable users being a key priority. And we see this especially in Logan, as well as River Heights, Millville, and Hiram. Next slide. All of this data analysis that we looked at both the why and the factors behind crashes, and we also focused heavily on the where on our network across the MPO area do we see these crashes occurring on a regular or recurring basis, and pointing us towards hotspots that may need further attention. And so we pulled in 5 years of that crash data, over 10,000 crash records, with a focus on the locations with higher injury and fatality levels, as well as other background risk factors, things like being near schools or other community amenities that are going to have children walking to them, areas where we see high levels of speeding and factors of that nature. And so through that, we were able to identify the top 10% of the regional roadway network that has the highest risk and is responsible for 97% of the KSI crashes that we've seen there, and 81% of vulnerable user crashes in the study area. So this really gives us a focus and says, here's the 10% of the network that's front and center for us, and where we want to focus our efforts on developing mitigations and projects to enhance safety. With that, I'll turn it back to Jeff.
So just a quick overview, the Safe Streets for All, Safe Streets and Roads for All is a federal program that was initiated under the last transportation reauthorization bill. And it really attempts to approach things with the so-called safe systems approach, which means that we need to have a broad range of attention to try to fix things, that there's complexities with these with transportation safety. And so, for instance, we know people are going to make bad decisions and have behavioral issues, but how do we build into the system some resiliency or some protections or some buffer in those? That's, the assumption that death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared. Safety is proactive, and redundancy is critical, is sort of that gamut that the Safe Streets for All program tries to move forward. So this program was initiated. We got a grant to do this safety action plan. There is funding available, although I will caveat that with it. If you haven't noticed, there's some I don't know what the word is in Washington, but some uncertainty with everything funding wise. But this is reauthorized part of the last bill, which in theory should go to through 2026. And so there's implementation grants that could be available, and that's part of the motive for this process, is to try to stand up a safety action plan that would make our cities eligible to go after some of those grant funds to implement some of the projects. And that's really part of the focus of this. We expect a round to open up in March. So this plan will be done in such time that cities could move forward with projects to apply for. There's also other state funds that are potentially available if we have the analysis and can really stand up a good application. Those are called Highway Safety HSIP, Highway Safety Program funds, and they work through UDOT, and local governments are in fact, and non-state roads are in fact eligible for that. So that's the Safe Streets for All program that is kind of what we're using as the motivator for this. Next slide. So the objectives is to develop a culture of safety, really, and I will say that we've seen the culture of safety make great strides really in the last 20 years. I've been involved in road projects and design projects for a long time, and I'm not saying that safety wasn't considered 10 or 15 years ago, but sometimes it was an afterthought in the design of well, after we ran out of budget and doing other things. But I will say now, with UDOT, with everyone, it really is front and center of ingrained in the culture of planning and transportation planning is a culture of safety. And we need to have it prioritize safety improvements by high risk, high crash areas, and have it be data driven. Because we don't have unlimited money, it means we need to focus it in areas that really demonstrate a safety benefit. Sometimes what we think may be a safety problem or the highest safety problem doesn't always bear out. So it's important that you at least inform that with data, and then improve enforcement, emergency response, and roadway safety for all users. Next slide. And I just want to hit quickly. We have focused on some engineering type solutions that Scott will go over later. But to really move this dial, we have to have a full gamut of attention to some things that are outside of just an engineering solution, and sometimes make people like me uncomfortable because we're not used to trying to deal with some of those things. And that has to do with, education and policy issues and coordination. So we've developed as an MPO some things we're going to continue to focus on to have continuity. So the consultants that are involved in this are going to go away fairly quickly, and we'll be left. They're always welcome to come back, but we'll be left with how do we keep and sustain this moving forward. So these are some things we're going to try to do. We're going to continue to highlight the CMPO commitment to safety with annual reports. We're going to support and highlight local safety, speed management efforts, those kind of things on a CMPO landing page. Isaac Gardner, who is with the CMPO, will be helping with that. We're going to kind of operate as a designated safety champion to try to keep energy and attention, try to monitor progress, dispense relevant updates, and assist with safety grant applications as we can, and support safety efforts with partner agencies. I mean, one thing I need to emphasize here is, this really takes all of us, and I hope with this, because one thing we saw from the attendance and the energy at the safety summit is there's no shortage of passion on this issue, that people realize we've got to do things and this matters. So we hope to capitalize on that, and maybe there's some areas where there's subcommittees that spin off of this, like for instance teen driving. We know we're overrepresented in that area. So if there's folks that want to get involved in that, and we can. And so what I encourage you, if you do, to email me and say, hey, I would like to, if there is a subcommittee on teen driving or whatever it may be. The point is we just need to kind of segue this process into things that really are going to move things. And sometimes that's getting people together, stakeholders involved. Rhonda Menlove's with UDOT, and one thing they do is at the beginning of every commission meeting, they have kind of a safety scoreboard report where they get a report of the last month, what's happened related to transportation safety. And it's a little bit hard to deal with because it's people's lives that they're reporting and those sort of things. But I think if at the CMPO level, we try to do something like that, where we have kind of an accounting of what happened. Sometimes elected officials, they hear of things in the newspaper, but it's hard to know, well, what can we do, or what were the circumstances of different crashes. So we hope to figure out a way to have kind of a safety focused agenda item with our executive council and elected officials. And then we're contemplating the idea of having a ongoing safety leadership summit like we've done, just to kind of keep a sustained effort on it, and leveraging other events and so forth to kind of elevate and escalate some of these safety issues that need to be addressed. Next slide. There's a great database that Department of Public Safety maintains, and I think Amy Winkler is on the line, and we're grateful for that. Cities can have access to that, and it's the crash data that can really empower cities, and it's all law enforcement agencies that report to that. So, cities will often have access to their own police department, but this is, highway patrol and everyone. So we'd like to really encourage this platform to be used more, just because it can shed light on different decisions cities are making, or trying to identify hot spots, that sort of thing, and having a data-driven response to this issue. Going to try to support grant applications and support local planning efforts, remain informed of new safety programs, and keep partner jurisdictions and agencies in the loop, and continue to maintain a web page presence on that. So I think, well, one final point, as part of our process, we collected from the general public and partnering agencies where people could drop a pin and just identify safety issues. And so we got quite a few. It's linked to on that story map, where you can go and click on individual comments. But we want to make sure these aren't forgotten. Our plan's not going to address all of these by any means. But cities on their own can kind of mine through this and see hotspots they may have, or issues that citizens may identified, and try to sort through those and figure out if there's actionable responses and what those might be. So I just want to make it clear that we're people that took the time to put these comments down. We hope to have follow-up ways to make sure these comments aren't lost. And with that, I think I turn the time over to Scott. Is that right?
Yep. So as been mentioned, we've had different safety issues have been brought up, and there's a variety of ways to address them. And the projects that I'll be presenting today, we've got two different projects, at least identified specifically for each city. This doesn't mean that you're limited to those two projects, or that they need to be implemented. These are items that we've identified and can be part of the infrastructure improvements. So in addition to the policy changes and helping to increase that safety, the culture of safety with other programs and campaigns for teen driving awareness and seatbelt use and DUIs. These projects are more of the infrastructure, the physical built. And we'll go through them quickly because not everybody's will have different interest in every single project. But on the safety action plan in that link, you can dive into the details of these projects. And if there's time at the end, we can talk about specific projects. But we're just providing a higher level here to help the group get a feel for the types of projects. And maybe it spurs some ideas of like, oh, I didn't think about that in our community. Interested that they had thought that in another community. So let's go to the next. We're just working from the north end of the valley, going south. So just that first in Smithfield, 2 projects, both on Highway 91, but first between First North and Second South. Have some looked at putting in some raised medians, looking to impact the speed on 91, slow it down, provide it more of a Main Street feel. There are some identified locations with pedestrian crossings, so wanted to address those with either a HOC, so a hybrid overhead crossing, or an RFB. And providing an extra enhanced pedestrian crossings, curb extensions, and bulb outs to help slow the speeds down. The second project there between 6th and 750 South have a section of the curb or the sidewalk that's missing. So finish that sidewalk, provide additional, make it more continuity across the city. Slowing speeds down on 91, and adding pedestrian active transportation options along there. So both in Smithfield, they focused more heavily on 91. If we can go to moving down to Hyde Park. Another project on 91, they had a long length of Hyde Park, install a separated bike lane, and that could be continuous amongst multiple cities, to add a bike lane along the highway to reduce speeds. That was a very common amongst many cities, to be reducing speeds. That could be done through a continuous a median barrier to give that visual cue to drivers that it's not a big huge cross section, and then also helps them slow down as they feel like they don't have as much leeway. That safe systems approach with humans make mistakes. We can actually use that to the advantage where if they feel less comfortable, they'll naturally start slowing down. We don't want them to be actually less safe, but just to feel like maybe we shouldn't be going 65, 70 miles an hour. Also adding curb and gutter and curb extensions and bulb outs as a possibility on 91 as well. For the second project in Hyde Park, they're on 6th South between Wolfpack Way and 12th East. That had a lot of concerns, especially with the high school nearby. Wanted to make the curb and gutter be continuous along the roadway. Construct a 10-foot multi-use path. Different sections have been built, and so completing that. Installing raised medians where it makes sense, not blocking access to side streets, but just providing that visual reminder that this is not meant to be a high-speed roadway. And then at corners and intersections to provide curb extensions and bulb outs to help slow people down at the non-roundabout intersections. The roundabouts do a good job of slowing people down, but at the other intersections where there's no visual cue of there could be some interaction here to provide that additional visual cue. So moving south into North Logan, first a big one there on 16th East. There's a lot of bicycle activity. You notice there that we have been providing that predicted number of crashes. Those are items where we've looked at the crash history and said, hey, these ones are specifically identified with here. you know, this is an example, like on 1600 East, we haven't had a bicycle, you know, a specific higher injury reported. It doesn't mean that they haven't occurred. And so that predicted crash reduction isn't necessarily a reflection of the safety benefit, but just would be to say how many crashes were identified and had been reported. And so in the applications that for the different grant applications and other items, we just want to word it to say these are the safety improvements, and maybe not need to say that there is 0 crash reduction, but that is there is a safety improvement there. So on 16th East, to add the bike lanes, could either be bike lanes on either side, or even a possible putting them next to each other, so you have a 2-way cycle track that would help group bicyclists together, and provide a better separation between vehicles and bicyclists as an option. And then the second project in North Logan on 8th East, connecting to USU, widen 8th East, provide that full cross section, especially on the west side, to add active transportation pieces of adding the curb and gutter and possible bike lane, and provide a good connection into Utah State from North Logan. Going into Logan, the next slide, the big project on 14th North between 10th West and 8th East. There are a lot of left turn crashes, a lot of business access. We just want to slow speeds down along 1400 North, focus some access points so that we can have more controlled left in and out to reduce those crashes. Provide a separated bike lane along the corridor. This one had one of the larger crash reductions. I think they had the largest of up to 103 crashes reduced by doing this type of project on 1400 North. And then the second one is more of an area look with the downtown to provide some continued traffic calming measures. Would be at the various intersections, would be some key intersections to add in curb extensions and bulb outs, and to just continue to provide that downtown feel where it's conducive for slower vehicles, active transportation, want people out of their cars and walking around. Going down to River Heights, this one, the first one there, the River Heights Boulevard coming into the city, there would be recommended to provide reducing that intersection. It has a larger area. River Heights Boulevard is a one-way coming into 4th East. Could help reduce that feel and help it be a visual cue that we're entering residential areas. We're no longer, we want to be going slow. Encourage those slower speeds in our residential areas, and providing curb extensions, bulb outs, and bike lanes. Active transportation pieces really help with traffic calming. The second project, second grouping is a few corridors, actually. That was just depicted on the 4th East, but 4th East, and then along 4th South, 5th South, and 6th South, to help slow vehicles down and to provide visual reminders that this is these are residents. If you're traveling on these roadways, we want to be going those slower speeds at 25 miles an hour. Have recommendations for not a full roundabout that we would think we need, big circle and approach angles, but possible mini roundabouts where it could be fitting within the existing right-of-way section. Some people call them traffic circles, but would bring in the curbs, providing the curb extensions, and then a median circle so that vehicles do need to go around it. It provides that visual cue of we're trying to go slow. We need to operate through this intersection slower, and that really helps distinguish that this is a residential neighborhood. Going down next into Providence. So the first one will go across on Main Street, east of, well, Main Street on Highway 165. Wanted to reduce speeds on 165, providing a visual reminder that even though there's not a in that section, there's not a lot of access points, and it is currently being built up. But there's a lot of speed related incidents along there, trying to encourage slower speeds there on 100 North between Main Street and 100 West. Improve the Gateway Drive roundabout. We can provide some additional channelized lanes so that the 2-lane section, it can be used fully as a 2-lane section, and it doesn't kind of merge into 1 lane. That would help with some directing some movements so that the roundabout itself doesn't continue to the capacity is fully maintained in that roundabout. Provide additional curb extensions, lighting, and enhanced ped crossings at the other intersections along the corridor to help improve active transportation, and then also maintain the speeds that we want on 100 North. Next, into Millville, main piece there on 3rd South to get that connection to 165. That's is currently in design, but we wanted to include this in here to add that additional safety benefit. That part of that crash reduction, it is showing 0 because it would be a new roadway, so the history isn't there, but it actually would shift crashes from vehicles from 2nd South would be using that 3rd South connection, where there is a safety benefit from there. So definitely don't use just that 0 crash reduction on 3rd South because it would actually shift the modes of traffic, and we could count those crashes from 2nd South that would be the vehicles that would be moving to 3rd. So that new roadway would improve that connectivity, helping establish more of an active transportation corridor along there. We could add the bike lanes or a multi-use path, especially connecting to the park on the east end. And then the second project, there 550 North, the intersection on 165, just on the upper corner, provide that as a full intersection, signalize it, provides that additional connectivity onto 165, and allows for a controlled access. Additional locations, further away from the intersection, we can put in raised medians to keep the speeds down, but then also improve the access. Going down into Nibley, Nibley Parkway, the first one right off of Highway 91, just into the business park area to signalize that intersection and improve the connectivity to get into that smaller dead end area. I believe that there's options and desire to further Nibley Parkway, but that'll at least be an initial step in connection onto 91. And then the second project on Main Street to reduce speeds and enforce that a good cross section, so the vehicles on Main Street are not speeding through Nibley and are maintaining that intended 45 or even 35 mile an hour speed limit or speeds through the city. As a reminder, speed limit, UDOT's speeds. We've had a lot of these on 91 and 165 and 89, where the speed limit that are posted is reflected of the land use or of the functional classification, and that the UDOT does want to take into account the desires and the growth of the community, and so that you need to continue to make your voices known of this is the the up and coming land use and the direction that we want the functional classification for these roadways to be, so that we can reflect the speed limit. Often the speed limit is predicted by, has been associated with the speed that the vehicles have been going, but there is movement and change to help reduce that and say, we don't want it what the vehicles are going, what do we want them to be going, what is the intended land use around there, and that can help drive and push that speed limit down rather than let it continue to climb. So going south into Hiram, two key intersections as main points. We had quite a few left turn and angle crashes on both of these intersections on Main Street. So 165 Main, and then on 3rd South near the high school. So adding access control, key parts of the intersection. So as you get further away, to put in raised medians, direct vehicles so that they're using different paths, so that they're not interacting so closely to the other vehicles in the intersection. So just trying to move those left turn crashes or left turn movements away from the signalized intersections, so that there's less for the driver to do and keep track of, and as part of driving. So and then on providing sorry, gonna add on 3rd South, we also wanted to potentially add mid-block crossings to help with the active transportation and getting pedestrians across to the schools. Going south, going further south into Wellsville on SR 101, and I was noticing Jeff brought up that in 2024 we had about another increase in K and A crashes, so the severe level crashes. This project actually I just noticed had another fatality on a 101, and so this is connecting to the highway. Wanted to make sure that we're separating, and there are kids using the shoulder to access 91. So wanted to provide a multi-use separated path and a separated bike lane, so that we can keep kids safe, and also would help to keep the speeds down on 101. On First West, along that corridor, there's some key intersections to help keep speeds down. That's mostly residential. Can provide that same mini roundabouts or traffic circles with curb extensions and circles to help keep that visual reminder that this is a slower speed roadway. We want people to be going lower speeds in our residential areas. So that hit all the 10 communities with the 2 projects that are specifically highlighted as part of the safety action plan. But again, this is, as Jeff said, we will be stepping away, handing this over to you, where want this to keep going. So continue to look at the crash trends and using the policies and other mitigations as tools to help continue on with safety and improve the safety within each of your communities. So those projects are not, you don't have to use these exact projects. They can be modified, and these are a lot of concepts level 2s, and showing what can be done with these ideas. For future grant opportunities, with specific to the Safe Streets for All program that we'll have an opportunity coming. Jeff mentioned here in March is the expected date. That may get delayed, but that doesn't mean that it's not still a great opportunity. You can still apply for the next 2 years if it's fully funded out for the next for the full 5 years. And again, it's approximately $1 billion nationwide that can be applied for these. And that's listed here as the 2 different grant opportunities, the planning and demonstration grants. So the safety action plan is part of the planning grant, but a demonstration grant is if you don't know if you want to implement some of these things, you can get funding to go put up temporary infrastructure. So you can get bollards or the cones or paint. All of that would be demonstration. Wonderful thing about paint is it washes off eventually. And so you can get a demonstration grant, which is a much lower threshold to get a grant for. $100,000 grant, you can do a lot of paint with that amount. Then implementation grant would be more of the physical changes to the infrastructure, the curb and gutter, putting concrete in the ground, and things that could not be really picked up and moved around very easily. And the implementation grant allows for these bigger projects to get implemented. They do want them to be larger, meaning around the $3 to $5 million per funding. And so some of these projects are smaller and would not get up to that $1 million, where you could group them together. You can do both of your city's projects at once, or get with your neighboring communities and put in a single implementation grant application where you're going to do 3 or 4 of these, and even add beyond what we have discussed in these projects, so that additional safety items can be addressed as part of that implementation grant funding. So definitely look, beyond the individual items that are within your a specific city, and see if there's opportunities to group those together. The great thing about say one more thing quick, is that it's not a heavy lift for those grant applications. Jeff has put one in for the planning, but it's not a 1,000-page document where we got to provide all of this information. And hopefully in our cut sheets, we've provided the analysis to help you be more competitive with these specific projects. So I think going from here into discussion, and I think Leah will lead that.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there on the slide, Scott. Yeah, so we're gonna open it up to Q&A. There are a few in the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, before we do that, Mayor Alders joined us, the chair of the CMPO. Do you have any parting thoughts? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I just appreciate this information. So many times we see on our police reports that there's been an accident, but we don't know what happened and why it happened. So having access to something that gives us that information, I think, is key, because then we can do something about it happening again. So I appreciate that. The information that you've given us about accidents that have happened in the past, and possible ways for us to mitigate those. So as we looked at each city, do we now that you've given us that information, we should write a grant and so that we can fix it? Is that what we're talking about here?
So
one option. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I would like to suggest that a lot of the things that are identified here, particularly the things that were identified on the input map, I mean, there may be things the cities can just address on their own. Some of these aren't high dollar things, or, so I think there's a lot of things, once we kind of look at the data, dig into the story it's trying to tell us. So there's a lot of things they can do on their own, but we do hope to empower, both through the Safe Streets for All federal program and although also the state HSIP safety money to try to maybe help cities go after those. So I think it's, and then there's the policy side of things that is more of just about getting the right good people around the table and saying, you know, what can we do to change this? Some of the more education and outreach kind of things, working with the school districts or with driver's ed training, you know, there's a lot that can be done just on kind of the policy side. So hopefully that answered your question, Mayor, but I think we're trying to empower cities largely. The CMPO is not going to be able to make this all happen on our own. It's got to be all our partners.
Well, it's once we all access this data and look at it in terms of our own cities, we can make that discussion point in our next meeting and talk about how we move forward.
Yeah. Sorry, Leah.
Not at all.
Thank
I did go ahead and put thank you, Mayor. I did go ahead and put the link to the site again in the chat in case you didn't catch it during the presentation. There is a ton of information there. We gave you, even though it was a good 40 minutes, we gave you the high level version. So there's a lot of data. There's a lot of analysis that goes into the safety action plan. And this is kind of the start, right, of improving safety and that road to Vision Zero. So Jeff, there's a couple of questions in the chat. We'll take those first, and then if we have time, we'll just have people raise their hands using the raise hand icon in the middle of your Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen. So the first question is from Levi with Nibley City. Is there still opportunity for input on these projects?
So I'll maybe start that out and Scott and others can chime in. We came around and, well, the consultants came around and met with all the cities to try to get which projects. We committed to 2 projects each where we do the safety analysis and kind of costing out of those. And so hopefully, you know, what you have is what was reflected from that conversation. So in terms of, is there still opportunity for input? I mean, I guess what I would say is if it's adding a whole new project to do an analysis on, probably not. We're towards the tail end of this process, but if there's some tweaks to projects or some inputs that you want to give, I think the process could accommodate that. Scott, did I say anything amiss?
Nothing amiss, and it's a great point that this is, safety is an ongoing thing. We don't want to just, try and check the box and walk away. Is that projects and crashes are happening all the time, and in 2024 I saw that there were 82 is the number that is roughly right now. They're not all finalized, but that was the fatal and severe injury crashes within Cache County. That's 82. So the number is actually, the average is getting pushed up some more. And so you'll always want to be reflecting upon what's current and happening. And so while these projects, we've identified what, is a snapshot, but we do want it to be more of a continuum and not just now that we've identified these for these specific projects. These are just the concepts, and as you move them forward, you can add things to that. And this is just where we've identified, here's some problems, here are some solutions, and it's not doesn't have to be that exact solution. So I'd say the additional input is as you're continuing to develop and putting those grants, that's where you can get additional items. And it's not until something's physically in the ground, it's can always be changed. And even then it can be changed.
Levi, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. I just some of the projects I'm not sure how well they reflect our discussion, and maybe we need to internally huddle up on it and see if there's some way to tweak them, but that's all right. Yeah, we can get back to you on that,
Sure.
Jeff.
Okay.
And willing to, we've got another couple weeks here. We can work with you too, Levi.
Thanks.
Shand asks, when you talk about reducing speed on 91, are you talking about lowering the speed limit or trying to reduce the amount of vehicles driving over the speed limit? I think you talked a little bit about functional classification as you were moving through the projects, but you want to address that one, Scott?
Yeah, Highway 91, the speed limit, as you all know, changes all goes up and down all as you're going throughout along the corridor. And I think that adds to the number of vehicles that are speeding, because at different sections where the roadway doesn't change much visually, it has the same cross section. You might have a higher density of number of businesses on your left and right on the as far as land use. But yeah, we'd want to make the speed limit more consistent and prevent vehicles from speeding where they don't feel like they will want to go 65 miles an hour. We want to provide a visual cue that they'll naturally select those slower speeds, especially as development continues along 91. Slower speeds is more economically viable, and then it prevents crashes and it allows more people to feel comfortable being in that space where you're not just feeling like you're trying to get from along the corridor. So your question there, I think, is both. We want to reduce speeds in some areas. We're not going to push it down where it's kind of, not going to set a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit to get all along the corridor. But set a speed limit that would be prudent, and then do different things with infrastructure and enforcement to help keep that speeds more of a consistency across the valley. So
Scott? It's a good point, though. I mean, the other thing is there's always some amount of driver responsibility, right? And so that's where enforcement and communication and policy change all come into play as well. You can't engineer for every potentiality.
yeah, and with the safe streets for all, or a safe systems approach, where we want to build safer roads, it is the term is to have a self-enforcing road, and so we can't design everything, but the more visual cues that we can provide to drivers, that the type of speeds that we want them to select, they'll select that speed. If we built it to look like a freeway, they're gonna go drive like it's a freeway.
Thanks. We're at time. We do have one more question, and I do want to just let people know we'll continue and we'll answer a few more questions, Jeff, if that's okay. But it is 10, so if anybody needs to drop off, we'll just thank you for your time. Sound okay, Jeff?
Sure. And
Great.
I can probably take those two questions pretty quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Mayor Jacobson Nibley asked a question about improving public awareness and recent experience they've had. Some of you may be aware Nibley installed some fairly, I don't know if the right words is progressive or forward-thinking safety elements as part of a recent roadway project, and to some degree got a little beat up on drivers that have perceptions of inconvenience on it. And I'm not sure I have any silver bullet on that, Mayor, of how do we change that. It often is the perception of the driver. I had an opportunity to have a conversation. Logan installed a roundabout and a oval about on 12th East. And I spoke to someone that said how bad that was and horrible. And, they go with through movements through that, and they now are kind of slowed down in their progression. But then I spoke to someone else that drops their kids off to school on 10th North that used to have horrible geometry and unsafe geometry, and now it works well. And so sometimes it's, everyone you know, if they're any way inconvenienced or things change, you know, there's kind of a backlash for that. And I don't know that there's any easy answer. I think one thing we can help do is to provide ongoing data and performance measures to say, you know, these things are helping, and that can kind of help. I think UDOT Zero Fatalities campaign is, as they do a great job, and the Department of Public Safety with that. If you've seen those, that kind of, I think, helps maybe reinforce the culture of safety, and maybe will help people accept some of these things more readily. But I'm not sure there's any easy answers for that. Mayor, do you have any follow-up?
No, I mean, not much. Thank you very much, Jeff. This was, I mean, it was meant to be more than a complaint. Please understand that. It's just, I guess I think like an engineer, just like a lot of the other people in this group, because that's my real job, and this mayor thing is just a hobby. And there's a whole nother side to this, I guess, is what, you know, maybe we can all help each other with, and that is the data-driven engineering decisions and implementations are one thing, and then there's a whole policy and public acceptance and you know, public understanding. It's the same with about everything we do in local governance. So if anyone can help us navigate that, you know, the public side of this, we're all ears. And if we can share some of those experiences and some of those successes, that would be fantastic.
Rest
Mayor.
assured, you will never make everyone happy. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Yeah. Mayor, UDOT does have a raised median toolkit that offers some ways to talk specifically about raised medians as a safety improvement. It doesn't necessarily work for some of the other kinds of interventions you might use in a program like this, but I did put it in the chat. We found that to be super helpful when we're talking to folks about medians in particular. There's a great little video that shows conflict points and how medians can eliminate those. So that's another way that's maybe less you know, fact and data specific, which some people kind of tune out for those kinds of discussions. This video is kind of helpful there. So
Excellent. Thank you for that discussion.
And then Tom asked a question about being proactive versus reactionary with some of these things, and he makes a good point. Part of this effort with the crash analysis did use a predictive model. So it, you know, crash data and what has occurred is very informative, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And so, you know, and there are tools to help with this where we can look at roadway characteristics and say, and predict based on that future crashes. So it gets to the thing that often comes up is how many people have to get hurt or die before you do something. It's striking that balance of trying to use tools to get more predictive. And then my final point on that is, you know, there are things that we could consider doing, or cities can consider doing, of having like a complete street policy where some of these principles are ingrained in their planning or in their policies, where, you know, it is more proactive rather than trying to react to problems all the time. Scott or Tim or anyone else, do you want to weigh in on that?
It's thanks, Tom. Appreciate that concept too, that it's a good point that we don't want to just be reactive, and that, you know, crashes are very random in nature, and that a roadway that's built one way, you know, two roadways that are built the exact same way, one will have a crash and the other will not. And so it is policies and things can help to reduce the risk of crashes, and that we're just trying to reduce the probability. And so, yeah, definitely don't want to just look at, you know, a whack-a-mole approach, and that any opportunity to ingrain the safety benefits within policies and are great. things to be doing. And one thing that I push and help in my own community is to change the way our your design standards. As developers come in, they look at the city standards, and these are our cross sections. This is how we build our roadways. You can change those so that it is being proactive, and that anybody who's coming in will build an intersection with curb extensions already, that they're just going to come in and build those, so you don't have to come in and retrofit it later after somebody's been hurt. And so look for those opportunities to naturally ingrain them and build them into your city policies and design guides.
I appreciate that, both Jeff and Scott. Yeah, I'm just looking at the plan objectives, and they just are, all of them just seem to be reactive. I don't know if we can add some objectives in this to just address some reactivity or some proactivity.
Proactive.
So yeah.
Great comment. Well, we can take a look.
So there's a question. Hopefully I'm not messing things up, Leah, but
No, you're
Gary
good.
Saxton asked about speed limits on Logan, Maine. I will tell you that UDOT has recently revised their policy on how they analyze requests to change speed limits on state highways, and it's more robust and allows for more factors to be considered. So what a city can request that UDOT do a new speed study on state roads that go through their jurisdiction. So Logan could request that and see where that new policy might come down on it. Might need to wait till the construction stuff is done with the underpass on Main, because I think it would some of the data collection might be messed up by that, but yeah, there's a process for that. I've not seen the new policy play out. I know there has been a fair amount of frustration with the speed limit policy on state roads so I'm hopeful that this policy will kind of allow a more robust way to look at things. I don't know if that answered your question, Gary, or if you have any question, I mean, we can follow up on that as well, or the city could. So one final point, and I'll plug it, and then maybe Amy Winkler can speak to it as well, but a plug for the upcoming Zero Fatalities Safety Summit. I've attended many of these in the past, and they are great resources. It's coming up on April 28th and 29th. Registration's open. I would encourage even cities to go to this. They have a lot of breakout sessions that are particular to topics that are relevant, enforcement, engineering, education. It's kind of the full gamut. So I'll make a plug for that and give Amy an opportunity to reinforce that plug if she would like.
Yeah, no problem. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, my computer's being weird. Yeah, this I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about the conference coming up, because like you said, Jeff, it is kind of everybody coming to the table. All the sessions are really, really, helpful. Anything to do with traffic safety. We only hold it every other year, so definitely good timing to try to make it if you can. But yeah, it should be great. Great conference. I think a lot of pretty much anybody on this call would be, find some benefit of attending some of these sessions. So, yeah.
So the Zero Fatalities education campaign has really done great work over the years. I just have one question. A few years ago, you bought ad time on the Super Bowl. You going to do that again?
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure if they're doing any for the main Super Bowl. I know for not the main Super Bowl, but the English version. I know we're doing an ad with our with DPS during on Telemundo. We have a great spot that's in Spanish about seatbelts. So I know
Okay.
we're running that, but I don't know what Zero Fatalities has
Well,
planned.
we'll watch for it.
Okay.
So Leah, is that all the questions?
Blake's got his hand raised, but that's all the questions from the chat. So
Okay, Mayor?
I do have a clarifying question. If I understood correctly, we could apply for grant money to come up with our community safety action plan. Is that correct? And then, so we could do that this first year, and then depending on what comes of that plan or that effort, then we could apply for implementation programs and or projects. And the plan may or may not line up with what we saw today in our community. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, sort of, Mayor. So Federal Highways encouraged that we do sort of regional safety action plans. And so in essence, the CMPO stood up this process. And so now you have a safety action plan that makes you eligible as a city to apply. We did it collectively. They encouraged not to have every city try to do one, but to try to get multi-jurisdictional plans. And so that's what we did with our 10 cities, part of the MPO. So in theory, you have an action plan now that makes you eligible to apply this coming round. You know, if you want to do a deeper, a more robust plan for just your jurisdiction, you know, there's maybe we could talk about maybe other sources to do that, like UDOT's technical assistance grants. I think they have a call for application out. That would be a great use if you want to do a safety action plan for River Heights City, for example. But I don't think they're going to fund you for an action plan because you've already been funded for one, and that's what this is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I need to get with you, Jeff, because I would go back to Levi's and Tom's comment in being proactive. We've got a project that's wrapping up in a neighboring community that I think is going to have probably more of a safety impact on River Heights than the two projects that were shown. And that's still coming online. So, you know, we got elementary school kids involved, and their behavior is unpredictable, right? Maybe more than people driving cars. So I think there's some things we should look at, but
yeah, and I guess we're open to it. I mean, we did meet with each city, so you know, hopefully, I'm not sure who they met with River Heights, but
yeah, and I'm not either because this is all new to me.
so we hope
if
that
I
we
can-
captured those kind of things. I mean, with this plan, even after the consultants are done, we can amend things into it and projects into it. We won't have the resources necessarily to do maybe the crash analysis and those kind of things that we've done for this project, but
Jeff, if I can just jump in on that point,
Okay.
there is a federal pool within the SS4A grant structure. Predominantly, the funds are available going forward for implementation projects. There's also the option of doing a supplemental planning study or demonstration project through SS4A funding. So that's another opportunity. We've seen a few communities down here in Salt Lake County after their WFRC did a full regional comprehensive safety action plan, go and receive funding through that stream to do a more focused look in their community, address particular corridors they're interested in, not go through a full design process to do a permanent installation, but come up with some temporary, 1 to 5 year type lower impact kind of projects to test out concepts. Whether that's a dedicated AT facility or intersection treatments or whatever else, as on a demonstration basis that could then be implemented on a full scale later, and just help you really focus in on your local needs. So there is some federal funding opportunity there.
Okay, well, I'll get with you, Jeff, on the side.
Okay.
We can talk about specifics rather than use everybody's time up here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
If I'll just add on to Tim's comment though, that back to the comment about public buy-in, I think the temporary installations are a really great way to get people to talk about how it might work, have people try it out, and then they can see that it's effective without spending a ton of money. Or if it's, you know, you get a lot of pushback, then it wasn't a big investment and you can remove it. So I think those are great ways to build that buy-in as well.
Well, we probably ought to wrap up here. I want to express our appreciation for all of you plugging into this and engaging in the cause, and just say that it's a worthy cause to engage in, and we can do things to make things better, and we hope to sustain that. So feel free, you know, if you want to email me and say, hey, I would like to get involved in this. I mean, you know, there's different areas, particularly on policy kind of things, that probably lend themselves to a committee or something, a spin-off kind of effort. And so if you want to get engaged in some of that, we have our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee too, that has always engaged in kind of active transportation safety pieces. So they would be a resource on that to try to help with things there. But with that, I think we'll sign off and say thank you. And feel free to email me or come visit with me if you have any questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank-
Thanks.